Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Riesinger. Billings City Council facing some tough decisions in order to finalize next year's budget. And tonight we're getting a better look at how $3 million in cuts could affect city services. Billings public pools are on the chopping block, and the senior center may close its doors on July 1st if other shifts aren't made to the city budget. Well, no final decisions have been made yet on the specifics of those cuts. The City Council will hear the recommendation from the Parks Board on Monday, hoping to avoid some of the closures. Q2's Mitch Legge joins us now with more.
As the Billings City Council looks to bring a public safety mill levy to Billings voters that would hope to bring in $4 million, the City Council has also asked its staff to cut $3 million from the budget. Some facilities that are possibly on the chopping block include South Park and Rose Park pools. Of the $3 million in proposed cuts, half would come from the Billings Parks and Recreation budget. The other half would be cuts from the Billings Police and Fire Departments. If the City Council were to adopt the cuts, a slew of park services and jobs may be gone, including the closure of the Billings Senior Center, which saw about 19,000 visitors last year. 5 full-time and 109 part-time positions are proposed to be cut, some of them dedicated to maintaining the city parks. Without those staff members, all bathrooms in the parks will close, and trash pickup will cease, along with a reduction in other services. On Monday, the City Council will hear a recommendation made by the Parks Board today. The board moved to request the council to shift money from the general fund into Parks District 1 to hopefully cover the cuts. In Billings, Mitch Legge, MTN News.
The City Council is scheduled to approve the 2021 budget on July 1st. That's the day you'll see closures if the cuts end up being adopted. Well, the renovation of the Alberta Bear Theatre is on schedule, but COVID-19 reopening guidelines postpone the grand reopening set for September. Q2's David J. reports on the indefinite delay of the new season.
Oh, this is amazing. We've been waiting and waiting for the railing to go up on the grand staircase. And so here it is today. Every day there's such a big difference that we can see in their progress, and it's exciting.
Jan Dietrich, the theater's executive director, says construction is on schedule, but the board needs to delay the start of the season.
It's really disappointing. I know my board's disappointed, the staff is extremely disappointed. It definitely was the right decision. We want our patrons, staff, volunteers, performers safe, and under the guidelines we just weren't able to do that, but it's pretty anticlimactic. Lot of energy, a lot of time.
She says COVID-19 reopening guidelines would allow for about 300 in the theater.
That's only if you can do it through the entire event. So we have concessions, we have restrooms, we have ingress, we have egress. So it's not just getting people in a seat.
The plan was to reopen in September.
Construction's been moving along quite well. A lot of activity on the site right now with all the rough-in trades finishing up and the finishing trades starting. There's a lot of overlap.
Dan Dooley is the project manager for the renovation of the theater that was built in 1931.
Getting ready for paint and final finishes going in. It's on the finishing stretch.
We will reopen when we safely can.
In Billings, David J., MTN News.
All right, thanks, David. And Jan Dietrich says some on Broadway have delayed their starts and international acts have visa problems. She says the plan is not to cancel those artists, but to reschedule. Well, tribal nations in Montana continue to aggressively test members for COVID-19. The Northern Cheyenne Reservation in southeast Montana is also keeping a stay-at-home order in place until June 19th. Today, the tribe continued drive-through testing for anyone to get screened, including those without symptoms. Governor Steve Bullock was there to talk to tribal leaders about the pandemic in Montana and the tribe's effort to keep people safe.
Already ran over 800 tests by 1 o'clock. So we're going to get well over 1,000. And, you know, what we're really trying to do is make sure that people both with any sort of symptoms or asymptomatic, without symptoms, get out and get tested, because the sooner that we can find positives, and the sooner that we can get our hands around it, that's what will keep from community spread and clusters.
7 of the 8 reservations in Montana have conducted surveillance testing. Well, state health authorities report 8 new confirmed COVID-19 cases across Montana, 2 of them in children under the age of 9. The girl and boy are from Gallatin County, along with 4 other positive cases today. The other 2 are from Bighorn County. The total of confirmed active cases is now 56. 7 people are hospitalized. In Wyoming, state health officials are now reporting another death from COVID-19. This brings the state total to 18 now, the same number of deaths as here in Montana. A Fremont County woman with pre-existing conditions is the latest to pass away. We've also learned that one of Montana's deaths from last month has been linked to the nursing home outbreak in Worland, Wyoming. According to the Wyoming Department of Health, the older woman was a Montana resident. There's no word on how she contracted the virus from the nursing home. Today, Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon announced more COVID-19 restrictions will be lifted starting on June 15th. The indoor gathering limit includes groups of 250 now with restrictions. Parades with a permit can continue, and all educational institutions are free to open and resume in-person instruction. Well, when Congress approved a massive coronavirus stimulus bill in late March, it included $1.25 billion for Montana for coronavirus-related expenses and impact. Now, 2.5 months later, only 2% of that money has gone out the door. MTN's Mike Dennison tells us what the Bullock administration has been doing or not doing to allocate this money.
Governor Steve Bullock appointed a task force to recommend how to spend this money. And after it issued a report May 1st, the administration lined out a dozen programs, including grants to businesses to help them survive and money for people who can't pay their rent or mortgages. But as of this week, only $25 million of the $1.25 billion in federal funding has been approved for disbursement. The biggest chunk is $10.6 million in stabilization grants for small businesses, distributed to about 1,600 companies across the state, employing up to 50 people each. Another $5 million has gone to nonprofit organizations, $4 million to local public health departments, and $1.6 million to Montana food banks. The state also has approved $1.5 million in emergency housing assistance, although not all that money is out the door. But more than 9,500 applications for grants are still pending, including 6,500 from small businesses seeking stabilization aid and almost 1,000 from people needing emergency housing assistance. Republican legislative leaders and members of the business community are among those saying, what's the holdup?
I think there's growing frustration with the slow pace of that. It doesn't do any good to sit in a bank account up in Helena. I think it'd be a lot better to push that out in the prescribed manner that the governor's task force has laid out for him.
Griffin also says that restaurants and others in the hospitality industry who've been hit particularly hard by shutdowns believe much more money from the $1.25 billion pot could be made available for them. Republican State Representative Lou Jones, a Conrad business owner who sat on the governor's task force, agrees. He and others also say the money should be leveraged to create more relief, such as a commercial loan interest deferral program that would enable banks to pitch in as well. And Republican House Speaker Greg Hertz of Polson says a large amount of money should be made available to local governments who know best where it's needed. The Bullock administration says it's waiting for local governments to submit requests for COVID-19 costs this week and in July. The governor also said last week that another option for business aid, similar to the loan deferral program mentioned by Jones and others, will be rolled out soon. As for the pace of the distribution of funds, the administration says it wants to be a careful steward of public money and make sure those who are getting it are eligible. Many businesses, however, say the clock is ticking on their financial future. At the Capitol, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
So far, the Bullock administration also has allotted only $170 million of total funds for specific aid programs. All right, turning to Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire, and luckily for us, Bob, it's been a quiet fire season so far, but that's not exactly the case in other states right now.
Yeah, we've been so cool and we had a wet spring, but in California, well, just take a look at this. Yeah, look at that. That's Bel Air, and you're looking at a 50-acre fire going straight up the western mountains there, and I tell you what, this is just really bad because this started this morning, and we're trying to get a lot of help on it, and it's starting to spread really rapidly now. They are in the middle of their fire season. Let me show you this graphic we have here. Shows you where all the smoke plumes are. You can see them there just close to Los Angeles. And then also more smoke is expected across much of Arizona and New Mexico. Had some wildfires there. So how come all of a sudden those guys are in the middle of wildfire season? Well, here's the reason why. Check it out. In Phoenix, 104 degrees today, Las Vegas, and also parts of Southern California, 3 digits as well. Meanwhile, back here in Montana, we're not nearly as hot. We're only into the 70s, and so we're still a little wet and a little bit cool. Our fire season has been postponed. I'm good with that. We'll have your forecast in a few more minutes.
All right, thank you, Bob. Well, family members of 2 Idaho children reported missing last year confirm that their remains have indeed been found on their stepfather's property. The search for JJ and Tylee Ryan even extended into Yellowstone National Park at one point. The children's grandparents released a statement today saying the family was filled with unfathomable sadness and could confirm that the bodies were the missing children. Chad Daybell appeared in court Wednesday today, where a judge set a $1 million bail. He's currently jailed on charges of destruction, altercation, or concealment of evidence. Lori Daybell, Chad's current wife and the children's mother, has been jailed since February on a $1 million bail. George Floyd's death has prompted calls for justice around the world. Today, his little brother went to the nation's capital to ask Congress to deliver. Skylar Henry reports from Washington.
A day after George Floyd was laid to rest, his younger brother marched in Washington, D.C. to demand justice for him.
I came to Washington so everybody can hear my voice.
Philonise Floyd was on Capitol Hill on Wednesday, testifying at a House Judiciary Committee hearing on police reform.
I can't tell you the kind of pain you feel when you watch something like that. When you watch your big brother, who you looked up to your whole entire life, die begging for his mom, I'm here to ask you to make it stop. Stop the pain.
Floyd urged lawmakers to take note of the widespread anger unleashed by his brother's Memorial Day death in police custody.
Honor them, honor George, and make the necessary changes that make law enforcement the solution and not the problem.
Congressional Democrats have introduced a bill to overhaul U.S. law enforcement. The Justice in Policing Act would establish new national standards for training, tactics, and record keeping.
Use your voice!
Across the country, protesters continue to march in George Floyd's name, including in Minneapolis, where he died. The city is ending contract talks with the union that represents its police officers. The chief called it a step towards progress.
There is nothing more debilitating to a chief from an employment matter perspective than when you have grounds to terminate an officer for misconduct and you're dealing with a third-party mechanism that allows for that employee to not only be back on your department, but to be patrolling in your communities.
CBS News has learned that before any criminal charges were filed against Derek Chauvin, prosecutors tried to reach a plea deal with the former police officer accused of killing Floyd. The initial third-degree murder charge was later upgraded to second degree. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Washington.
3 other former officers are charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder. Thomas Lane was freed today after he posted a $750,000 bond. Floyd's death came on Lane's 4th day on the job. Still to come on tonight's 10 o'clock news, we're going to head to Dixon, Montana, population 200. Let you know how COVID-19 has impacted rural ranchers in this small Montana town. And in sports, we're going to hit the gridiron as Scott fills us in on the fall plans for Grizz football.
You're watching MTN News with Janelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Breen. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.